Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today. We're really aiming to give you a shortcut, a full understanding of what's next in education. These intelligent tutoring systems, or IDS,
Yeah.
and these aren't, just quizzes on a screen. They're powerful AI tools, and they promise truly personalized, almost expert-level instruction.
And we're focusing this deep dive on the intelligence part. How do these systems go beyond just, marking right or wrong? How do they act like a really good human tutor?
Right.
Because the change here is pretty profound. Modern IDSs, they're analyzing the whole learning journey, cognitive strategies, weird inconsistencies in reasoning, even tracking emotional ups and downs in real time.
That last bit, the emotion tracking, that's what really caught my eye. Because you think about the best teachers you've had, right? They weren't just subject experts. They knew how to handle struggle, frustration, keep you engaged. So the big question for you listening is, can algorithms, can structured knowledge bases actually capture that messy human side of learning?
And if they can, how close do they really get? I mean, compared to a real live human mentor.
Exactly.
So we've dug into some fascinating research here, stuff that really makes you question some old beliefs. We'll hit 4 main areas. First, the basic architecture and some, honestly, shocking data on how effective these IDSs are.
Okay.
Second, how they model those tricky non-cognitive things like emotion swings, especially in high-stakes areas like medical training.
Uh-huh.
Third, how IDS actually try to optimize learning behaviors using something called complex systems theory. Sounds complicated, but it's really interesting.
We'll break it down.
And finally, how they deal with student inconsistency and map out mastery in core subjects like fractions and algebra. So yeah, let's dive in.
Okay, let's start with the basics. Everyone listening has probably used some kind of educational software. So what's the clear line? What makes an IDS different from older computer-assisted instruction, CAI?
Right, it's not just about better graphics or being faster. It's really about when and how deeply the system steps in. If you go way back to Carbonell's work in 1970, he made this key distinction.
Okay.
Older CAI was frame-oriented. Think rigid blocks of material, pre-scripted stuff. They mostly do what we now call outer loop behaviors.
Outer loop. That's like, did you get the final answer right after the fact?
Exactly. You finish the whole problem, hit submit, then you get feedback. It's reactive. But IDSs, they're information structure-oriented. They have this dynamic knowledge base, like a model of expertise. And they use complex tools to pull out the right info and have much more nuanced interactions. This allows for the really crucial inner loop behaviors.
Ah, that's the key difference then. Inner loop. Getting help, hints, support while you're actually doing the problem.
Yes, like someone looking over your shoulder saying, hang on, check step 2 again.
Yeah.
Before you go way off track.
That makes sense.
And this whole shift from reactive to proactive real-time help, it relies on these 4 classic features that researchers like Fletcher and Anderson identified. First, you need an explicit domain knowledge model. That's what the AI knows about the subject.
Like the textbook, but smarter.
Kind of, yeah, better organized. Second, a dynamic Studer model. This is the system's picture of you, the learner, what you know, what you don't know, your skill level right now. And it's always updating.
With every click, basically.
Pretty much. Third, the pedagogical module. This is like the tutor's brain. It looks at the student model, looks at the domain model, and decides what to do. Should it give a hint? Show an example. Ask a pointed question.
So it's the strategy part, making it adaptive choices.
It connects the dots, yeah. And fourth, you need a flexible user interface. You need a way to actually communicate those inner loop hints effectively, often graphically. Without that, the intelligence is kind of useless.
Okay, so that structure leads us to how granular these interactions can get, because that really determines how deep the system can peer into your thinking process. Van Len laid out this spectrum in 2011, right?
Yeah, he clarified 3 main types based on interaction granularity. On one end, the simplest is answer-based tutoring. That's the old CAI style, outer loop only, reactive.
Right.
Moving up, you get step-based tutoring.
What does that look like?
So here, you, the user, have to enter the steps you'd normally take. The interface tries to mimic how you'd actually work it out, maybe like showing your work in a math problem online, or those old systems that taught VCR programming.
Oh, wow, really? VCRs?
Yeah, some early studies use that. You'd enter one command at a time. The hints are usually short, just about the reasoning for that specific step.
And the most fine-grained, the deepest level?
That's sub-step-based tutoring. Here, you're not just entering procedural steps, but inputs that reflect your actual mental work, your inferences. Maybe filling in the blanks in a logical argument, or explaining why you chose a certain path. It forces you to make your thinking visible.
Okay, this structure, this granularity, it all sounds very sophisticated. which brings us to the big question. Does it actually work? Because this is where, as you said, a major myth in education really gets busted, the whole Bloom 2.0 sigma problem.
Ah, yes, the legend. For decades, people believed that one-on-one human tutoring gave this massive effect size, a D of 2.0 standard deviations, better than classroom teaching. And ITIS were seen as lagging way behind, maybe at 1.0.
That 2.0 number from Bloom's study, it was like the holy grail, the absolute benchmark.
It really was. It set the target for decades. But then Van Len did this huge meta-analysis, looked at 28 different ITIS evaluations.
And what did it find about human tutoring first?
That was the first shock. The average effect size for human tutoring across many studies wasn't 2.0 at all. It was significantly lower, 2.799 towns. Still very good, obviously, but nowhere near the mythical 2.0.
Wow. Okay, so the gold standard wasn't quite as golden as we thought.
Not in typical practice, no. But here's the second shocker, the big validation for the tech. The average effect size for intelligent tutoring systems, specifically those step-based ones with lots of interaction, was $2.796.
Wait, say that again. Human tutors average $2.799 and IS's average $2.706.
That's right.
That's basically the same. The difference is tiny. It means these top ISs are essentially matching the average impact of a human tutor.
That's the core takeaway, yeah.
Yeah.
It strongly suggests there's this interaction plateau for highly interactive tutoring. Whether it's AI or a person guiding you step by step, the benefit seems to top out around 2.755 to 80 cents a fear.
Huh. An interaction plateau. So maybe we've hit the limit of what this kind of intense interactive tutoring can generally achieve, regardless of who or what is delivering it.
It's a compelling idea.
Yeah.
But is that $T is 766 cents the whole story? Does it mean all the extra stuff, the emotion tracking, the network analysis we'll talk about, is just adding tiny improvements? Or does effectiveness really depend on how you measure it?
Ah, good question. Because averages can hide a lot.
They really can. And when you dig into the factors that influence ITS effectiveness, one thing jumps out. Test type. It's crucial.
How so?
When studies use a local test, one designed by the researchers or developers specifically, to measure the complex skills the IIDS teaches, the effect sizes are large. Average ES dollars and $732,000. The IS clearly works for what it's designed to do.
Okay, but what if they use a standardized test, like a state exam, maybe more focused on recall?
The effect size just tanks. It drops dramatically, averaging only ES dollars and $332. It's a huge difference. You see this in studies of cognitive tutor systems, for example.
Right.
They got ES dollars and 76 cents on their own complex problem-solving tests, but basically nothing. ES dollars and 32 cents on standardized tests that focus more on, say, multiple choice recognition.
So the ITS is successfully teaching the hard stuff, the complex thinking, but the standardized test isn't picking that up. It's measuring something different. It sounds like a measurement problem, not a teaching failure by the ITS.
That's exactly how many researchers interpret it. It confirms ITests are really built for teaching deep understanding and process, not just cramming for standardized recall. And we see other factors too. Effects are a bit smaller in huge studies for younger kids.
Which grades?
K-12 averages ES dollars of 4.444 cents, whereas post-secondary students average ES dollars 7.55 cents.
Interesting.
And effects are also a bit smaller for foundational math compared to other subjects. It kind of suggests these systems work best when learners already have some level of self-direction.
That point about self-direction is actually a great bridge to our next section. Because if ITests are matching human effectiveness and outcomes, what else are they capturing? Are they getting at that messy human element? Let's turn to medical training, super high stakes, right? Full of fear, stress, that emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, this is really the cutting edge of ITS research, moving beyond just the cognitive steps into those non-cognitive factors. And one big focus is emotion variability. Basically, how much a student's emotional state fluctuates. Researchers are using systems like BioWorld to see how this variability impacts self-regulated learning during stressful clinical reasoning tasks.
Okay, before we dive into the emotion part, let's just quickly define self-regulated learning, SRL. What's that cover?
SRL is like a master skill for learning. It's about managing your own learning process, your behavior, your thinking, your metacognition, your motivation, and, importantly here, your emotions to reach your goals.
And in the BioWorld system, they break down this clinical reasoning process into phases that relate to SRL.
That's right. 3 main phases. First is forethought, reading the patient info, figuring out the main problem, setting goals, planning how you'll investigate.
Then the heavy lifting.
Exactly. The performance phase, actually doing the work, applying knowledge, forming hypotheses, using the system's belief meter, ordering lab tests, searching the online library, trying to crack the case.
And finally,
The self-reflection phase, evaluating your final diagnosis, justifying why you think it's right, summarizing the whole thing. It forces you to think about your thinking.
Got it. So let's picture this bioworld system. What's it like, and what were the cases they used to crank up the pressure?
BioWorld is this really sophisticated simulated clinic. Students get a patient profile, an evidence table to keep track of data, a way to manage their hypotheses, and importantly, they have to choose which lab tests to order. These cost virtual money or time.
Okay. And to test difficulty.
They needed a clear contrast, so they used two patient cases. The easy one was the Amy case, type 1 diabetes, pretty classic symptoms, easily confirmed with standard tests like blood sugar, designed to be straightforward.
And the tough one.
That was the Cynthia case, pheochromocytoma. It's a rare adrenal gland tumor. And critically, you can't diagnose it just from symptoms or basic tests. You need complex, specific tests like measuring certain things in urine and blood platelets. It forces really complex, adaptive reasoning, lots of uncertainty.
Okay, now the big question. How do you actually measure something like emotional variability? How do you put a number on feeling flustered or confused?
They borrowed a concept from information theory, actually.
Right.
Shannon entropy. It's typically used to measure uncertainty or complexity in communication signals.
How does that apply to emotions?
Well, imagine tracking a student's self-reported emotions: anger, anxiety, confusion, maybe relief at frequent points during the task. If they just report anxious the whole time, the entropy is low, near zero, no variation.
Right.
But if their reported emotions jump all over the place, confused, then hopeful, then frustrated, then anxious again, the sequence is complex, unpredictable. That gives you a high entropy value up to a max of about 2.58 in this setup. So higher entropy means more emotional fluctuation, more variability.
That's a clever way to quantify it. So what did the entropy scores show when comparing the easy Amy case and the hard Cynthia case?
Well, first, difficulty definitely mattered. Students showed significantly higher emotion variability, higher entropy when tackling the difficult Cynthia case. The stress of dealing with ambiguity and complex evidence clearly stirred things up emotionally.
Did that high variability hit evenly across the forethought, performance, and self-reflection phases in the hard case?
No, and this is really interesting. In the difficult Cynthia case, the highest emotional variability by far was during the performance phase, significantly higher than during the initial planning or the final reflection.
That makes intuitive sense, right? That's when you're in the thick of it, running tests, maybe hitting dead ends, hypotheses failing. Why is that phase so emotionally volatile?
The researchers think it's directly linked to the sheer amount of behavioral activity. During the performance phase, students are doing more things, ordering more tests, frantically searching the library, rechecking symptoms, juggling conflicting data. This constant cognitive and behavioral flux, having to adapt to unexpected results, seems to directly fuel the emotional ups and downs. High behavioral variability went hand in hand with high emotion variability.
And the easy case?
No difference in emotional variability between the phases. Just reinforces that the task difficulty was the key trigger for that internal turbulence.
Okay, so we know the middle part of a tough task, the performance phase, is emotionally choppy. How do ICES go from just measuring that to actively helping manage it? Let's look at how they use these things called pedagogical agents, PAs, to support self-regulated learning. We've got meta-tutor as an example, teaching the circulatory system.
Right, this is about the ITS playing a more active role. PAs are basically programmed helpers, often like little characters, that provide timely prompts and feedback to scaffold those SRL skills. The goal is for the student to eventually internalize them.
And these prompts target specific strategies.
Exactly. They target cognitive SRL strategies, things like rehearsing info, summarizing, taking notes, and metacognitive SRL strategies, planning your approach, monitoring how well you're doing, evaluating the material, judging your own understanding.
So what happens when students get these PA prompts versus a control group who just have to figure out strategies on their own?
The results were pretty clear. The group with the PA scaffolding them, they showed higher learning gains. And they also used most of the key cognitive and metacognitive strategies more frequently. Things like activating prior knowledge, summarizing, evaluating content, judging their learning.
Most, but you said not all. There was one exception.
Yeah, interestingly, the control group, the ones without the PA prompts, actually did more planning. The thinking there is maybe they were getting a bit lost or sidetracked, needing to constantly replan because the system wasn't guiding them as directly. But for the core learning actions, the PAs definitely boosted frequency.
Okay, but here's where it gets tricky. Researchers looked at the sequence of strategies using Markov chains. Like, Do students go from planning to monitoring to summarizing in a different order with the PAs? And surprisingly,
Surprisingly, no. The PAs didn't significantly change the overall sequence of how strategies were deployed over time.
that seems like a paradox, right? If PAs improve learning and make students use strategies more often, why don't they change the basic flow?
Exactly. It suggested that just looking at strategy A, then strategy B, wasn't capturing the real difference. Maybe you could follow a good sequence, but do it really repetitively and inefficiently, right?
Ah, like getting stuck in a loop.
Precisely. And this led them to look through a different lens, complex systems theory.
Okay, deep breath. Complex systems theory. How does that apply to someone learning about, say, the circulatory system? What's it trying to measure?
Instead of just the sequence, it looks at the dynamics of behavior over time. The core idea is that effective learning, functional SRL, needs a kind of functional balance. It shouldn't be totally random, but crucially, it shouldn't be too rigid or repetitive either. You want a mix of novel patterns, doing something new or different, and repetitive patterns.
And too much repetition is bad, like spinning your wheels.
Exactly. Highly repetitive behavior is seen as dysfunctional. You're stuck, not adapting, not introducing new approaches. To measure this, they use something called auto-recurrence quantification analysis, or RQA.
Okay, RRQA. Let's break down the key metrics there, recurrence and linearity. What do they mean in practice?
Imagine you're stuck studying. You reread the same paragraph, highlight the same sentence again, check the same website. Recurrence measures how often that specific pattern of actions repeats. Linearity measures how long you stay stuck in that loop before you break out and try something different. High recurrence, high linearity means you're basically trapped.
Okay. So what did RQA show about the students who had the PA prompts?
This was the key finding. The learners prompted by PAs showed a significantly lower degree of repetition, lower recurrence rates, lower linearity.
Ah, so that's what the PAs were doing. They weren't necessarily changing the big picture sequence, but they were stopping students from getting stuck in those unproductive, repetitive loops.
That's the insight. They were scaffolding functional SRL by intervening just enough to encourage more novel patterns, more variation. This less predictable, more adaptive behavior is what correlates with better learning. They weren't just suggesting strategies, they were preventing the learners from getting bogged down.
That makes so much sense. And can we quickly tie this idea of functional synergy back to the medical cases? We saw high emotion variability during performance. Did strategy use correlate with performance?
Yes, but it wasn't just about using more strategies overall. It was about the timing and combination. High-performing medical students showed more co-occurrences of self-reflection and lines of reasoning than lower performers, especially in that difficult Cynthia case.
So they were better at thinking about their diagnosis while they were actively working on it.
Exactly. They could integrate that reflective step with the ongoing diagnostic process more effectively. That synergy, that functional connection between reflection and action, seemed to be what really made the difference.
Okay, we've hit architecture, emotion, self-regulation. Let's swing back to core subjects like math, where eye tests have been used for a while. A huge challenge there is student inconsistency. Getting a problem right one minute, then wrong the next, even if it's similar. How do ITAs even begin to model that? It must mess up their student model.
Oh, it's a massive challenge for prediction. The system thinks it knows what you know, and then suddenly you contradict it. To handle this, ISs often use a pretty sophisticated multi-strategy machine learning approach. Think of it like a committee of different reasoning styles all working together, maybe using a Blackboard model where they share insights.
A committee. What kinds of reasoning are on this committee?
Well, typically three main types. First, inductive reasoning, often called similarity-based learning or SBL. It looks at tons of examples of inconsistent behavior and tries to find general patterns like, okay, inconsistency seems to happen most when the question involves X and the student is at Y level.
Okay, pattern finding. What's second?
Deductive reasoning or explanation-based learning, EBL. This is more analytical. It tries to explain why a specific instance happened based on the system's existing knowledge of math rules. If you get a subtraction problem wrong, EDL tries to pinpoint the exact rule or concept you missed.
Makes sense. And the third handles the outliers, the weird cases.
Pretty much. Analogical reasoning or case-based reasoning, CBR. This helps when SBL and EBL are stumped, maybe with a totally new problem type or a student's very first mistake. It finds the most similar past case it does understand and makes an educated guess based on that analogy. Combining all three lets the system learn about the properties of inconsistency itself.
So after all that complex learning, What did the ITS actually figure out about when and why students are inconsistent?
It learned some really useful things. For example, inconsistency happened most often at the novice or advanced beginner stages, where knowledge is still shaky. It was triggered more by complex questions, like ones involving computing, describing, or mixed steps. And it could even pinpoint specific procedural weaknesses, like trouble with addition with carrying, or subtraction with borrowing. Those classic spots where students might seem okay 1 minute and then suddenly falter.
That's incredibly specific feedback. Okay, let's shift from inconsistency to dependency. We generally know fractions are important for algebra later on, but that's broad. Can IDS data tell us which specific part of fractions predicts which specific part of algebra?
Yeah, this required digging into huge amounts of real student data. Researchers used psychological network analysis on data from the Better Marks IDES. We're talking over 3,000 students, 250,000 problem sets. They built this detailed map showing how different math subtopics connect.
And the overall connection was strong, fractions and algebra generally.
Very strong, yeah. The aggregate correlation was weak dollars and 724.7, but the network analysis let them zoom right in, treating each little subtopic like adding fractions or solving linear equations as a node in this big knowledge network.
So did they find a standout link, one specific connection that was really robust?
They did. One statistically significant cross-topic connection really stood out. F8, fractions in the order of operations, was strongly predictive of success in A1, using formulas in algebra.
F8. Order of operations with fractions. Predicting A1. Using formulas. That's fascinating. They seem different on the surface. What's the underlying connection?
It's the shared reliance on operating rules. PEMDAS, BODMAS, whatever you call it, the rules about brackets first, then exponents, then multiplication division, then addition subtraction. Those rules are critical for correctly simplifying fraction expressions, F8, and for correctly evaluating formulas, A1. If you haven't mastered those rules with fractions, you're likely to mess them up when plugging numbers into formulas too.
It's the abstract procedural skill that connects them. So for an ATS, this map is gold. If a student bombs A1, the system doesn't just say, go study fractions vaguely.
Exactly. It can say, specifically review F8, order of operations with fractions.
Good.
It lets the system guide the student back to fix a foundational gap they might not even realize is causing the current problem. It enables really targeted scaffolding.
Okay, last piece. We have this powerful tech. What about the humans using it? How do prospective math teachers actually view integrating these ITS? What does it say about how they see their own role?
Researchers looked at teachers' concerns and how they mentally positioned the ITIS. Initially, many concerns were basic, informational, what is this thing, and personal, how it affect me, my workload. That's stage 1 and 2 stuff. There was some moderate interest in actually modifying their teaching based on ITS data, which is a higher level concern, stage 6.
And did they fall into different camps regarding how they'd use the ITIS?
Yeah, 2 main metaphors emerged. The most common, about 55%, was the servant. These teachers saw the ITIS as a tool to automate tasks grading, drill practice. It helps them do their usual stuff more efficiently, but the core teaching doesn't really change. The ITIS is an assistant.
Okay. And the other view?
That was the partner, around 39%. These teachers envisioned using the ITIS more collaboratively. They'd look at the real-time data, maybe on inconsistency or strategy use, like we discussed, and use that to make immediate pedagogical decisions, like, okay, the ITIS shows half the class is stuck here, let's pause and do a mini lesson, or let's group these students based on this error pattern.
Partner versus servant. Did this positioning correlate with the teacher's confidence or knowledge?
Definitely. The teachers who saw the ITS as a partner were also the ones expressing more interest in modifying their instruction, that stage 6 concern. And crucially, they also reported higher levels of overall TPAC, their combined technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge.
So the teachers who felt more skilled overall were more likely to see the AI as a collaborator, not just a tool.
Exactly. It suggests that embracing the ITS as a partner requires, or perhaps builds, confidence in blending technology with deep teaching knowledge to really adapt instruction on the fly. #outro.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive into intelligent tutoring systems has really covered some ground. We kicked off asking if AI could truly match a human tutor, and I think 2 big takeaways stand out for you, the listener.
Yeah, the first is just how effective these systems actually are, based on the evidence. That interaction plateau idea is powerful. These step-based IDTESs, with their complex architecture, are getting learning gains, practically identical to average human tutoring, 2 out of 709. That level of interactive instruction is genuinely achievable with AI now.
And the second takeaway for me is just how human the data points are that they're modeling. It's gone way beyond just checking answers. We're seeing them map these deep, subtle connections in knowledge, like the fraction order of operations linking to algebra formulas, allowing for incredibly precise help.
Mm.
And maybe most profoundly, they're quantifying internal states, like emotional variability, pinpointing that moment of peak chaos during difficult tasks.
And that insight allows IDESTs to do more than just automate. Using tools like that recurrence analysis, they're not just suggesting strategies, they're actively working to prevent students from getting stuck in those unproductive loops. They're optimizing the learning process itself, informed by cognitive and even emotional states.
Which brings us right back to that high-stakes medical scenario, but really it applies anywhere complex. We know emotion variability spikes during the hard part, the performance phase, and we know top performers somehow connect reflection to their reasoning during that phase. So here's the final thought for you to chew on. If you're wrestling with something complex, learning a tough new skill, what specific conscious action could you take right in the middle of that stressful high-entropy performance phase
Yeah.
to deliberately interrupt a potential repetitive loop and turn that emotional turbulence into more productive, adaptive thinking? What novel step could you force yourself to try?
Something to definitely think about. How do you inject functional novelty when you feel stuck? Keep pondering that until you join us for our next deep dive.